She is the single most powerful elf to remain in Middle-earth during the entire Second and Third Ages. A will of diamond that even Sauron could not penetrate. Before she was the serene Lady of Lórien, a figure of ethereal wisdom, she was a leader of the greatest rebellion in the history of the Elves, a princess whose personal ambition burned so brightly it would span 7,000 years. Her saga of pride, exile, and repentance makes the entire dynasty of Gondor's kings seem a fleeting chapter. In the beginning, before the sun and the moon, there was only the light of the trees. This was Valinor, the realm of the gods, a land of utter perfection and eternal bliss. Here, among the Noldor, the most skilled and knowledge-hungry of all elves, a princess was born. Her name was Artanis, the noble woman, but she would come to be known by another name, Galadriel. Her father was Finarfin, a prince of the Noldor, but her mother was Irwen, a princess of the sea-loving Teleri. This mixed heritage gave her a unique temperament, a blend of fiery spirit and deep contemplation. She was said to be the most beautiful of all the House of Finwë, save for Luthien, and the greatest of the Noldoran women. She possessed a strange gift of insight, the ability to peer into the minds of others and judge them fairly, though she often kept her own counsel. But her most famous feature was her hair. It was a wonder, weaving the gold of Lorelin with the silver of Telperion into a living tapestry of light. It was so magnificent that it was said to have inspired the creation of the most coveted jewels in all existence. For it was her uncle, Feanor, the greatest craftsman of the elves, who first begged her for a single tress. 3 times he asked, and 3 times she refused him. Her piercing gaze saw the darkness and pride that festered in his heart, a consuming fire hidden beneath his brilliance. She would not give a single strand to one she held in such low esteem. This refusal became a legend, a quiet clash of 2 of the proudest spirits to ever walk the earth, a foreshadowing of the cataclysm to come. Galadriel was young, but she was not naive. She was proud, strong-willed, and filled with a burning desire for a destiny of her own making. She loved the Blessed Realm, but she felt confined by its perfection. She dreamed of the vast, untamed lands of Middle-earth, a world she had only heard of in whispers. She longed for a realm to command, a place to rule and order as she saw fit, free from the oversight of the Valar, the divine guardians of the world. Her ambition was a secret fire, but in this perfect world, a shadow was growing, and it found its most fertile ground not in malice, but in ambition. How could a paradise designed by gods become a prison for their greatest children? The great enemy, Melkor, later named Morgoth, had been unchained. Feigning repentance, he walked freely among the elves of Valinor, and his words were poison. He spoke of the cageling elves, kept as pets by the Valar. He whispered of the coming of men, the usurpers who would inherit Middle-earth while the elves were held captive in the west. His lies were subtle, targeting the pride and the hunger for knowledge that defined the Noldoran people. And on no one did these lies fall more readily than on Feanor, and on Galadriel. Though she despised her uncle, she shared his chafing discontent. She listened to the whispers, and found in them a justification for her own secret desires. She yearned for freedom, for the wide, unmastered world. She was, in her own heart, one of the foremost leaders of those who would later be called the exiles. She needed no oath and no command to set her on that path. Her mind was already made up. Then, the world broke. In a single, catastrophic act of violence, Melkor, aided by the primordial spider spirit Ungoliant, destroyed the 2 trees. He murdered Finwë, the High King of the Noldor, and Feanor's father, and he stole the Silmarils, the 3 great jewels Feanor had crafted, which held the last unblemished light of the trees within them. Valinor, the land of eternal day, was plunged into an suffocating, absolute darkness. In that darkness, Feanor delivered the most powerful and terrible speech in the history of Arda. He renamed Melkor Morgoth, the black foe of the world. He claimed the kingship of the Noldor and railed against the Valar for their failure to protect them. He called upon his people to abandon the land of the gods, to pursue the Dark Lord to the ends of the earth, and to reclaim the Silmarils, their stolen light, by force. He then swore a terrible oath, an oath that would echo through the ages and bring ruin upon all who took it. He and his 7 sons swore by the name of the Creator, Ilúvatar, to pursue any being, god or mortal, who withheld a Silmaril from them, and they called the everlasting dark upon themselves if they failed. The oath was an unbreakable, unholy vow, a perversion of will that would poison Middle-earth for thousands of years. Feanor had lit the flame, but the desire to leave, to rule, to forge a new destiny, was already a fire in the hearts of many. And among the proudest of these rebels, A princess of the royal house stood foremost. But was her rebellion for the sake of her people, or for herself? Galadriel did not take the oath. Her wisdom, even in her youthful pride, was too great for such a reckless bond, but she stood with the rebels. Her personal desire for the freedom of Middle-earth aligned perfectly with Feanor's call for vengeance. She was the only woman of the Noldor to stand tall and valiant among the warring princes that day, eager to be gone. She would march out under her own command, a leader of the great host, a rebel against the will of heaven itself. The Valar did not forbid their departure, but they would not aid it. To reach Middle-earth, the Noldor needed ships. The only ships in existence belonged to the Teleri, the sea elves who lived on the coast at the city of Alqualondë. They were kin, the people of Galadriel's own mother. The Noldor, led by Feanor, went to them and demanded passage. The Teleri refused. Their ships were their life's work, gifts from the sea spirit Ase, and they would not use them to aid a rebellion against the Valar. Feanor, consumed by his burning rage, ordered his followers to take the ships by force. What followed was the first time Elf had ever shed the blood of Elf. The Kinslaying at Alqualondë was a stain on the Noldor that would never be washed away. It was a brutal, senseless massacre. Galadriel and her brothers, part of the second host led by their father Finarfin, arrived after the fighting had begun. Though she did not draw her own sword in the slaughter, she and her people did not turn back. They pushed on, marching past the carnage, profiting from the crime, their ambition driving them forward over the bodies of their own kin. It was then, on the northernmost borders of the Blessed Realm, that a voice of doom spoke to them. A figure appeared, believed to be the Valamandos, the doomsman of the gods. He proclaimed the prophecy of the north, the doom of the Noldor. He cursed all who followed Feanor, foretelling that their quest would end in sorrow and betrayal. He warned that the oath they swore would turn on them, that they would spill the blood of their kin again and again, and that their light in Middle-earth would fade into a long and weary grief. The doom was spoken. A curse of shadow and betrayal would follow them into the dark, but none could yet imagine the first and most terrible form that betrayal would take, not from their enemy, but from their own kin. Hearing the doom, Finarfin, Galadriel's father, was overcome with grief and repentance. He turned his host back, and was granted the pardon of the Valar, becoming the ruler of the Noldor who remained in Valinor. But his children, including Galadriel, would not turn back. Her pride was too great. She had set her course, and she would not be swayed by threat or prophecy. She would see Middle-earth, no matter the cost. The host pressed on, but their numbers were too great for the ships they had stolen. Feanor and his sons, ever impatient and arrogant, took the ships for their own followers, and set sail first, promising to send them back for the others. They left the larger host, led by Feanor's half-brother Fingolfin, stranded on the shores of Eremen, with a vast and impassable sea before them. And from across the water, the abandoned elves saw a great light rise into the sky. It was not the dawn. Feanor, in his final act of treachery against his own people, had set fire to the Telerin ships. He would not risk their use by any who might turn back, or by any he deemed a rival. He had abandoned his kin to perish, stranded, betrayed, a curse hanging over them, and an impassable sea before them. To the west lay the shame of returning to Valinor to beg for pardon. To the north lay the only other path to Middle-earth, a frozen, nightmarish wasteland of grinding ice and perpetual twilight. The Helcarax, the grinding ice. Faced with an impossible choice, the host of Fingolfin, with Galadriel and her brothers among them, chose the path of defiance. Driven by pride and a refusal to be beaten, they turned north to attempt the crossing. It was a journey of unimaginable horror, a slow march through a land of death, where the very air cut like a knife. The ice screamed and shifted beneath their feet, and many were lost, falling into the frigid waters or simply freezing in the cruel dark. This was a crucible of suffering that would forge the Noldor into a hardier, yet more sorrowful people. And for Galadriel, it was a forge of a different kind. For in the absolute, grinding silence of that frozen hell, broken only by the shriek of ice and the cries of the dying, she began to perceive something else, a different kind of sound, a different kind of sight. But was it a gift? Or was it merely the first echo of the curse? In a place so utterly devoid of life and light, the veil between the seen and the unseen worlds wore thin. Here she was confronted not just with the cold of the ice, but the eternal, empty cold of the void from which Morgoth first came. She began to feel the despair of her people not as sympathy, but as a sharp, physical pain in her own mind. She could perceive the fading hope, the terror, the grief of those around her, as if they were her own thoughts. It was a brutal, invasive power, born of shared trauma, in a place of uttermost dread. This was the true beginning of the Galadriel we know, the Lady of Lórien. who could look into the hearts of men and elves. Her sight was not a gentle gift from the gods. It was a weapon she forged herself in the heart of despair, a shield of perception she had to build to simply survive the crossing. Finally, after an age of suffering, they arrived. They set foot in Middle-earth, the land of their ambition, the object of their rebellion. They had crossed the grinding ice, but the host that arrived was smaller, harder, and sadder. They were exiles, and the shadow of the doom of Mandos clung to them like a shroud. And as they recuperated, a wonder beyond all their expectations occurred. The Valar, seeing the suffering of the world now that Morgoth was abroad, made a new thing. The sun, for the first time, a true dawn broke over the world. The Noldor, who had only ever known the gentle silver and gold light of the trees of Valinor, or the cold eternity of the stars, shielded their eyes in wonder and terror at the raw, brilliant fire of the new day. This was the world they had come to claim, a world of stark shadows and brilliant, burning light. A younger, wilder world. They had arrived in a land called Beleriand, the northwesternmost region of Middle-earth. And here, they were not alone. This land was already home to elves, the Sindar, or Grey Elves. These were kin who had never made the journey to Valinor, and who lived under the stars, ruled by the great King Thingol and his queen, Melian the Maia, a being of divine power. News of the Noldor's arrival. A mighty host of their long-lost kin, armed in bright steel and bearing a new and terrible light in their eyes, spread like wildfire. Galadriel, with her brothers, traveled south, and eventually came as guests to the hidden kingdom of Doriath. Ruled by their mother's kinsman, Thingol, it was a realm of ancient woods and deep magic, protected by a powerful enchantment woven by Queen Melian herself, called the Girdle of Melian. No evil could pass its borders, and few could find their way in without her permission. And it was here, in the heart of this ancient elven kingdom, that Galadriel's path would be forever altered. It was not the king she sought, but the queen. In Melian, Galadriel saw a reflection of the power and knowledge of Valinor she had left behind. Melian, in turn, saw into the heart of the Noldoran princess. She saw the immense pride, the burning ambition, and the deep, unhealed wounds from the crossing. But she also saw a spirit of immense strength and a deep yearning for knowledge. Melian took Galadriel under her wing, teaching her the deep lore of Middle-earth. She taught her of its peoples, its secrets, and the nature of the shadow that now fell upon it. From Melian, Galadriel learned a wisdom that was deeper than the craft of the Noldor. It was a wisdom of living things, of preservation, and of foresight. Yet a shadow of secrecy remained. The Noldor, and Galadriel among them, did not speak of why they had truly left Valinor. They did not speak of the Silmarils, the Oath of Feanor, and most of all, they did not speak of the Kinslaying at Alqualande. They presented themselves as princes in exile, come to aid their kin in the fight against the great enemy. But how long could a secret that vast, a crime that terrible, remain hidden from a queen who could read the hearts of all who entered her realm? The silence held, but it was not empty. It was filled with Melian's knowing gaze, and with the questions she did not need to ask. Galadriel felt that gaze like a physical weight, probing the darkest corners of her memory, the places she had walled off even from herself. The Queen of Doriath did not need a confession. The truth radiated from the Noldor like a fever. Rumors, carried on the wind and in the speech of the Sindar who had met other, less guarded Noldor, began to filter into the sheltered realm. Whispers of a bitter journey, of strife among the exiles, and a darkness that had nothing to do with Morgoth. A darkness they had brought with them. And then, the whispers reached the king. The full, unvarnished tale of Alqualande, the slaying of elf by elf, upon the hallowed shores of Anaman. A sin so profound, so unthinkable, that it wounded him to the very soul. The trust he had offered his newfound kin shattered into 1,000 pieces, replaced by a righteous and terrible wrath. He summoned the sons of Finarfin before him, and the truth could be hidden no longer. Before the fury of the king, the story was laid bare, not of a glorious rebellion against a distant god, but of a frantic, prideful flight, stained with the blood of their own people. A curse spoken by the Valar themselves hung over them all. In that moment, Galadriel did not beg for forgiveness. The pride of the Noldor was too deeply ingrained in her. She had chosen her path, and she would walk it, whatever the cost. She and her people had come to Middle-earth to fight the enemy, and in their pride, they had become an echo of the very evil they sought to destroy. The doom of Mandos was not a prophecy. It was a mirror. And Thingol, king of Beleriand, delivered his judgment. He would not shed the blood of his kin, but the crime would not be forgotten. Never again in my realm shall the tongue of the Noldor be spoken, he decreed. The language of those who slew my kin at Alqualande. All the Sindar shall hear my command, that they shall not speak it, nor answer to it. The Noldor were cast out from the heart of the elven lands. Their beautiful tongue, the speech of Valinor, was silenced. They were driven to the north and the west to build their own kingdoms on the front lines of the war. They were allies of necessity, but exiles still, forever marked by their past. And so, the stage was set. The children of Feanor, driven by their terrible oath, the hosts of Fingolfin, arrayed for war. The hidden kingdoms, holding their breath, and the shadow in the north, patient and malevolent, watching them all. The rebellion was over. The war had just begun. The great tragedy of the First Age was ready to unfold. The tale of the Silmarils is a song of creation and destruction, of light and of darkness, of heroes who shone like stars, and of a doom that consumed them all. This was only the first note. To hear the rest of the symphony, to witness the great battles, the epic love stories, and the fall of empires, subscribe now to the Silmarillion Chronicles and never miss a chapter of the greatest story ever.